When we talk about persuasion, we usually focus on the things that we say or write, and that makes sense. We use our words to persuade other people. But when we focus so singularly on what we have to say, we end up in situations where everyone is competing to talk over and past each other. In those scenarios, everyone has an opinion, everyone only cares about their own opinion, and we end up fighting and fighting instead of actually solving problems. Of course, that's just hypothetical, but I bet you can imagine a darker alternate reality where everyone is stuck shouting their opinions in an endless ideological stalemate. Surely we wouldn't want to end up like that. Luckily, there is a way to avoid the endless shouting match, but it will require us to adjust the way that we think about rhetoric and persuasion. See, when we spend all our time talking about and thinking about what we have to say, we end up overlooking one of the most valuable persuasive strategies that's out there: listening. That's right. Before we ever think about where we stand on the issues of the day or how we're going to back up the claims that will demolish our opponents once and for all, we might stop and think about how our arguments and audiences will benefit if we take some time to listen to them first. So today, that's exactly what we're talking about. If you want to join me on my naive utopian journey to improve the ways that we talk about and solve our problems, then this is just the video for you. But if you're the kind of cynic who just wants to win debates, well, I still think listening is the right tool for the job, so I hope you'll stick around too. In 1999, the scholar Krista Ratcliffe presented the idea of rhetorical listening in an essay that pointed out the need for greater understanding in our ongoing rhetorical discussions. The goal, she says, is to listen not for intent, but with intent, in order to understand not just what people are saying, but to understand all the history, beliefs, and values that inform the arguments that people make. That is, when we do rhetorical listening, we're not just trying to figure out where the weak points are in an argument or trying to discover some kind of ulterior motives in what someone is saying. Instead, we're working to understand our audiences deeply so that we can in turn understand their motives, goals, and desires. Ultimately, Ratcliffe says that when we really listen, we may better appreciate the reasoning powers of others, even when we disagree with them. Listening, then, requires us to see our audiences and potential opponents as real people with real-life experiences that have influenced their good faith perspectives on the problems and issues that we all face. As I understand it, it involves looking beyond the words that we hear and focusing on the humanity of the ones saying them. From there, we can use that shared humanity as a starting point for a more productive discussion. When we commit to real listening, our goal is to understand other people and to work together as we face life's problems, not just to win a particular debate. I think the first step to listening well is recognizing that our own perspectives are limited. I'm sure I'm not surprising any of you to say that you don't know everything. Other people know things that you don't know. One of the consequences of my having been in school for way too long is that I'm more aware now of all the things that I don't know. It's basically a cliche, but the more I learn, the more I realize that I still have to learn. It's hard to listen to people when we've got it all figured out. What could they possibly tell us that we don't already know? But when we recognize that we don't actually know all that much, we're in a better position to hear other people out and to find out what they know. Then, rather than assuming that they disagree with us because they're stupid or evil or lazy or whatever, we may find out that they disagree with us because they have experienced life in very different ways compared to us and have learned very different things as a result. For example, there was a big push not too long ago by the US Department of Agriculture to advertise the fact that they had lowered the recommended safe cooking temperatures for cuts of pork from 160 degrees to 145. And it wasn't that hard for a lot of culinary types to get on board. The new recommendations meant the difference between tender, rosy pork chops and dry, overcooked ones. Now, there are probably people who are still uncomfortable with the idea of eating pork that hasn't been cooked to 160 degrees, and it's not because they're backwards know-nothings with poor taste in food. It could just be because they remember a time when eating rosy pork was a serious danger, or they could be from somewhere in the world where cooking pork to 160 degrees is still an important food safety practice. So it would be really foolish for a modern chef to shout at that cautious consumer and just tell them to get with the times or follow the science. Talking without listening may not do very much to persuade them to change, because it would produce an argument that totally ignores their underlying concerns. It would be helpful and wise then to listen to that cautious consumer, to really try to understand why they don't feel good about ordering 145-degree pork. And it's not just because they're being willfully stupid or antagonistic. It could be that they remember a time not too long ago when it was genuinely unsafe to eat something cooked to that temperature. In that case, the persuasive task is not to post angry tweets about how stupid they are, it's to help them understand how and why the recommendations have changed. When you recognize that you don't have all the answers and that other people may in fact have very good reasons for standing where they do, it gets a lot easier to begin to understand them, and that understanding in turn provides a foundation for actual solutions instead of ever escalating fights. Describing the importance of listening in rhetoric, Wayne Booth wrote, "Here, both sides join in a trusting dispute, determined to listen to the opponent's arguments while persuading the opponent to listen in exchange. Each side attempts to think about the arguments presented by the other side. Both sides are pursuing not just victory, but a new reality, a new agreement about what is real." So, by recognizing the limitations of our own knowledge and the validity of experiences beyond our own, we can make room for the kinds of questions that will help us to really understand other people and make steps towards solving the problems that we face. We can listen for what their goals are. If a disagreement has arisen, it's probably because what you want and what they want are seemingly at odds. But what do they really want? You may want tacos and they might want pizza, but what they really want is to not be hungry. And if you can understand that, you're well on your way to making good progress. And you can listen for what motivates them. If you're trying to persuade people and get them working together on the same task, you're going to need to understand what would motivate your audience to change what they've been doing before. And here's a secret. They don't need to do something for the same reason that you do it. If, for example, you want somebody to install solar panels for environmental reasons, and they end up doing it for financial reasons, does it really matter? Even if the motives are different, the outcome is still the same. And of course, listen to yourself and pay attention to where you might be wrong. We could spend a whole video on this, and we probably will, but as we listen deeply to others, we may come to understand that we don't want to hold on to our own assumptions and beliefs as tightly as before. Radcliffe put it this way: we should question ourselves, our attitudes, and our actions to determine whether we need to affirm, revise, or reject them. As I've learned more about rhetoric, persuasion, and other people, I've come to hold many of my positions with a looser grip. And that's not to say that I've given up my convictions, just that I've gotten better at understanding what really matters and what's just a matter of personal difference. Really, I've come to understand that it's okay to change my mind, because figuring out what's true is more important than winning, and that's the real goal of listening. A few years ago, I was really let down by a paper. Well, I should say I got really excited to see a paper entitled "A Republican Talks to Republicans About Climate Change," but the paper that followed was kind of a letdown. That's because the title promised an exercise in real listening or real understanding. There's a lot of unproductive yelling around the topic of climate change, and the title of this particular paper led me to expect an argument that would really pay attention to the concerns, goals, and attitudes of a political party that is often accused of not caring too much about the environment. Unfortunately, even though the title led me to believe that I was going to read a unique discussion of climate policy designed to really motivate an audience of Republicans to adopt and pursue a response to climate change, the actual argument ended up sounding an awful lot like something that a Democrat would write to a bunch of Republicans. What disappointed me was that it was a missed opportunity. Instead of showing the audience that it really understood them and their priorities, the paper chose instead to replicate arguments that an audience of Republicans was probably pretty good at tuning out. There was no evidence of listening in the paper, so there was not a very good chance that the audience was going to listen in return. Of course, that was a first draft, and I can assure you that the final version addressed that problem, but the point remains. When we don't listen to our audiences, we can be pretty sure that they aren't going to listen to us either. It's no fun to talk to someone who isn't paying attention, and it's no fun to read things written by people who are more interested in stating their own opinions than in working through a problem to find a collaborative solution. So by listening, we ensure that our arguments are more persuasive because we understand our audience and know what will persuade them. But we also ensure that our audiences will listen in the first place because we're showing them that they're being heard and respected rather than manipulated or abused. In the quotation that opened this video, we saw that the ultimate goal for making listening a part of our persuasive process is to achieve an understanding of the truth. We've all got bits and pieces of it, but we're going to need each other and to listen to each other if we're going to get the whole picture. So we listen because getting it right is more important than being right. If we really want solutions to the problems that affect everyone, we can't rely on perspectives that only serve us. We'll get a lot further together than alone, and that starts with listening. And of course, I should point out that there's a difference between listening to someone and endorsing bad ideas. We don't have to agree with somebody else's bad ideas to listen to them, but we had better understand why they're willing to believe something dangerous if we're ever going to change their mind. Listening doesn't mean anything goes. We are trying to persuade people after all. Listening just means that deep understanding is the best foundation for meaningful persuasion. By listening, we can take a lot of the fighting out of our important debates and lay the groundwork for more humane discussions and more productive solutions. Plus, when we really listen, it's much harder to coerce, manipulate, or abuse other people. So listening is more than a handy strategy. It might just be the solution to many of our current rhetorical woes. And as we finish up, I suppose I should thank you for listening. It means a lot. And if you have any thoughts or questions, please let me know. I'm all ears. Otherwise, take care until we meet again.